Oh, God. You get out.
I believe so. But then they're also like radar around. I'm not sure how the world that works. Most of theirs they try to do. Actually, all of them. That's what I think about it. So, but like I don't really understand how you shift between UBCs.
Yeah, you'll just fall.
Yeah, he's doing the CIA. All the stuff he really hasn't been able to do at that level because he's been largely the only engineering team. He's starting to do that now. Yeah. Yeah, right.
Built up all this stuff, but then he didn't like something come down his leg.
Yeah. Nope. No, I was actually sharing all with another guy. When they moved those stuff back on offices. Yeah.
Can you see an input?
Yeah, I can.
Can you switch to the computer input?
Play with husbands where's the map on that?
I haven't had a map, so far I haven't had a map.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Got in my head, I used to say I would use it this morning, because Max, we've got a lot of corporate networks at the
I've never used an FPGA before. Try this thing.
One on my SDR. I haven't looked into FPGA programming either.
Oh.
Woohoo! I made it just in time. What's going on behind you? You're pinging?
I want to test my keys. That's my Ubuntu.
Your keys?
Yeah, the cloud instance.
I'm just gonna say no.
Yeah, sorry about that.
All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome. As always, we want to thank Ridgeline for providing the space, because without the space, we probably couldn't do this much. So we appreciate them sitting back there. And also our other sponsor who has yet to make it to this new venue. Susie couldn't make it because, again, her family is more important than us, and I just think that's rude. Apparently one of her nieces is getting married or some stupid event like that. I just, it's horrible. You just can't, we've got two sponsors and only one is really reliable. And I told her I was going to give her shit for missing, so she'll get over it. As always, anyone here looking for a job? And who here is hiring? All right, so afterwards, I'll do this again afterwards, and we can all get together and hopefully somebody can find a job. So today's meeting is going to be 3 quick talks, well, somewhat quick. I will be starting off talking about Pi-hole and demonstrating. I do have a wireless network here, so I'm hoping that that we can all connect and it works, because apparently the way their wireless is set up is you can't connect to another machine.
Isolation.
Yeah, every machine's isolated. So hopefully what I've done will cure that, and we'll try. Yes.
So the last time I came, there was no one-armed bandit at the parking garage. Today there was.
There's a,
Yes, okay, I just wanted to make
Right.
sure. I stuck it in there and it made a noise, so I just wanted to make sure that was good.
yeah, and those of you who haven't yet, and this is just me being anal and paranoid, I always wait and do it at the end because sometimes they have a timer. And so when you come and they do that, come in and as we go out, scan. Although you can tell us next month if there isn't a timer.
Very good, yes.
So,
To be honest, if you don't mind me stepping in.
No.
Parking is supposed to be free. So if people are getting that ticket and you validate it and you're getting charged, I want to know because I want to go back to them and be like, what the hell?
And if that happens, we will arrange we'll try to bitch at them for compensation for however. Just keep your receipt. And that's a good point. I meant to bring that up when I had to have that card. Anything else anyone? Oh, sorry. And then Zach here is going to talk about fish. Pardon? Andy, sorry. Sorry. Look, I woke up at 1 o'clock this morning, and from 1 till 4, I finished my slides.
It's dedication.
No, that's because I couldn't fucking sleep. And my wife, who's in the UK, when I called her at 3 o'clock in the morning, she's like, "What the hell are you doing awake?" So, Andy will be doing fish shell, even though that's redundant. But Andy will be talking about fish shell. And then you've got to suffer with me again talking about Traefik, which is an edge router that works really well in Docker. I will confess now, I didn't have as much time as I wanted to do Traefik, so it's not as in-depth as I really wanted it to be. There are a few holes, and I apologize for that, but at least it'll get you started with it, and I've got a list of resources at the end. The big thing I'm missing is I couldn't get it set up with Let's Encrypt, and I'm kind of sad about that. So I'll go ahead and start with Pi-hole. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we are. Yes. Okay.
There's a link on the meetup.
He has doubts. In other words, he is trying to stream and is failing. So we'll wait. Thank you. So how many people are familiar with what Pi-hole is?
Heard of it? Heard of it.
Heard of it, does that mean you know what it does?
I've been told to shut it.
To what? I'm married also, so I understand that. I'm married and my wife is British, so I've been told that many a time. Pi-hole is an ad blocking, I don't want to say software, but it's ad blocking. It's network-wide ad blocking. So basically what happens is once you have this set up, you set up your router to point DNS to your Pi-hole server. And all of your DNS entries go through Pi-hole. If on one of the many lists, Pi-hole finds a site to be an ad site, it will return a not found error. So unlike ad block on your browser, which still will bring in the ad, just block it from showing on your screen, Pi-hole will stop it at DNS level, so your browser never even realizes that the site exists. And the beauty of that is it will speed up your network, your web surfing quite a bit. I've been running Pi-hole for roughly 2.5 months, and more or less 30%, 25 to 30% of all my DNS queries are blocked by Pi-hole. So that's a ton of DNS queries, and that's a ton of ads. And of those ads, almost 50% are Microsoft.
Really?
It's a Microsoft URL. So that that I thought was pretty sleazy, but then it's Microsoft, so what do you expect? So that right there is the front page for the Pi-hole webpage, and I just had that up while I did the intro. So what we're going to talk about today is server. So you could go that route, but why? You've already got it set up. Finally, you choose your interface, your network interface that Pi-hole will listen to. As you can see, I had Docker on this machine. So from here, you pick your DNS provider. They provide a longer list than what you see on the screen, but the popular ones are OpenDNS, Google, Level 3, Komodo, and on down the list. Personal preference. Some people like Google. Some people think Google is about on par with Microsoft and evil. So OpenDNS is owned by Cisco now. So that also, people have thoughts about that. So pick the one you want. Pi-hole uses third-party lists of ad domains, and as you can see there, it uses 7 different lists. So if choose them all for the highest amount of ad blocking, and you can even add your own later.
Does it read them in?
Yes. Yeah, part of the install will download all those lists. One thing to realize when you're dealing with ad blocking lists is they are all held in memory. So if you have an older Pi, you may not want all those lists because it could affect the performance of the DNS lookups. Yes?
How often does it refresh the lists?
You do it manually. And I'll show you where that is. We'll do it in the demo. You can choose IPv6 or IPv4, which of course you want to do. Here's where it talks about your current network settings. In the case of this, yes, it was assigned by DHCP. If you want to use the current settings, if you've already set it up statically, say yes. Otherwise, if you hit no, you can then put in your desired CIDR-based IP address. Then put your default gateway and verify that it's correct. They warn you that it's possible that your router could try to give out your IP address to another machine on your network through DHCP. Most won't do that, but if you have an older router, it might. So when you're assigning an IP address, try to put it outside of the DHCP range that your router will use, and then you won't have that problem. Do you wish to install the web admin interface? The web admin interface does not run on HTTPS, so you want to keep it limited to your network. You don't want it to get out, or just not have it at all. There is a command line interface that can do most of the stuff we're going to see in the demo. So if you don't want to take the chance of that being out, access, then say no. But if you do, it runs its interface on light HTTPD, and so it'll ask you to install it. And you kind of either do both or none. It asks if you want to log queries. If you're going to use the interface, log the queries because it gives you a lot of information. That's how I know that Microsoft shows up so much. If you don't want to log the queries, if you don't want the dashboard, then if you don't want the dashboard, you don't want to log the queries. Finally, it talks about a privacy mode for FTL. They use FTL DNS, which I know absolutely nothing about because I didn't have time to look it up, but FTL, I'll explain a little bit about it in a minute. The wording on that is kind of misleading. The wording, it's not anything to do with your privacy really, it's how much gets logged. And I'll show you the different levels. There are, as you see, 5 different levels. You're not gonna give anything away by logging everything because it's all staying on the Pi and it's all staying in your network. So the privacy note, FTL DNS provides the DNS and DHCP services. The DNS service is based on DNS mask, and there's an API that provides the network analysis and stats that show up on the dashboard. Privacy levels are set. Privacy level sets the level of info provided on the dashboard. Level 0, all stats are provided. Level 1 will hide the domain. It will disable, and you'll see it when I bring up the dashboard. It'll no longer do the top domains portion of the dashboard, and it won't do the top ads. And you'll see that in the dashboard. Level 2 hides clients and domains. So 2 is a combination. It hides the stuff from level 1 plus the top clients and the top clients over time. The clients being your machines when they connect. 3 hides all the things, and it hides everything. The query log, long-term database logging, and all the previous stuff don't work. There's 1 or 2, but at that point you may as well just disable it. So once it's complete, it shows you a summary of what you're doing, and right here, that is the random password to log in to the admin part of the dashboard. You can change it once you log in, and like everything in that nature, you probably should. But that'll be your login password. It is also contained in one of the files on your Pi. I just forget which one. So here's what the dashboard looks like. And these are the queries and the clients over time. That's what gets dropped with level 1. The query types and answer by, that gets level 2. And then over here on the side are the different configurations and tools that you can use with it, which we'll go through when I do the demo. As you can see from this, there have been 40,000 queries. Of the 40,000, 6,000 have been blocked, and 16.5%. It's not a total since forever, so that percent block goes up and down quite often. And then it shows you the number of domains on the block list. So, 113,000, you can imagine that does take up a little bit of memory. And then the bottom half shows the top permitted domains, and hey, Amazon's number 1 on this one. Top permitted, top locked, top clients, which I only have 3 because I had it going, I tested it, and then I added it to my router. So, and then top clients blocked only. So, if you guys want to see the demo, if you want to follow along, there's an SSID Novalug 5G. The passphrase for it is May 2019. So if you want to follow along, you're more than welcome to log in. And I'll give you the IP address in just a second. Any questions, by the way?
When you said you tested it without the router, you do that?
So if you guys want to see it in action, you can directly point your machine to your Pi hole for for DNS resolution, which is what I did to start. And then I updated my router and pointed my router's DNS to the pi hole. So when I make a query, it goes from my machine to my router, from my router to the pi hole. It either gets blocked or it goes out to, in my case, OpenDNS.
So if you wanted to play around with it, but not take a chance on screwing up your wife's connection.
You can do that,
Just point
yes.
your laptop directly in.
Yeah, okay.
Another deployment option is you teach your DHP server, or whichever that is, to hand out that IP address instead of it, so that way you get all
Right, that, which I
the, when you're ready to
didn't,
jump up this.
right, and then your clients will just be outrageously fun.
Also, upstream DNS, if you use DNS on your network, you want to point it for the upstream to your DNS and then let it go to wherever you want to go. That's the other gotcha. It breaks your local resolution if you use DNS on your own network.
That, anyways around that, but useful.
Just the pi hole, tell the pi hole to point your original DNS. And
Okay.
then you can, then whatever DNS you were using before you started still works. But if you look up, media, if you have a box locally, media,
Yeah.
it'll still find it.
Come on, there we go. All right, so the IP address for, where did I put my keyboard? The IP address for this is, how many of you are connecting to my wireless and trying this out? Okay. Sorry.
I just have to use the last octet.
Yeah, the last octet would be 2. The gateway is 1, DNS 2, which is kind of how I have it at home as well. So go ahead and point your DNS to that 2, and I'm going to leave it up to you to know how to do that.
What's the first line?
It's 192.168.8.2. The other thing I forgot to mention is the dashboard runs on port 8080. Or not.
I thought it was straight 80.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But you have to do a /admin now, manually, because it doesn't work.
They'll give you a link, looks like.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Well, I run out. Oops, I need to.
And what did I forget to do? I forgot to look at the admin password. This is one I built specifically for what we're doing today, just like my AWS crap that we're going to do for Traefik. Do you have the, can I borrow your pen? Pad. The paper. Into security.
There must be a couple releases behind. When I hit mine, it doesn't ask me for a password.
Well, it doesn't until you hit the login screen.
Well, I meant, no, I get the full screen whenever I just hit it like that. That's the way mine looks when I hit it.
Okay. So, as you can see, there are currently 4 clients and we've had 133 queries. If you want to test it out, a really good site to test it out is
Careful.
Speed Test.
Oh,
Oh, you're not talking blocking.
oh, okay.
Okay, I don't mind. If it makes it easier to see, I'm all for it. So,
I'm sure Facebook would run it up too.
Facebook does, yes. There are lots of things that run it up. Now, one thing about it though, where ad blocker will rewrite the HTML to block out the ads, Pi-hole does not. So you will find gaps if you're reading a news page, for example. You'll see a gap where an ad should have been.
It's just white.
It just leaves it white, or if it's an image, it'll just have the box with the little X in the middle. So it doesn't, it still kind of interrupts the flow of your reading, but it's definitely nicer to see a blank box than an ad
That's like
flashing.
flashing up, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Are there instances where legitimate pages are blocked?
Yes.
Yeah.
You ever see false negatives? Lose any of your content?
I
Of course, you
haven't,
don't know.
I haven't that I've
Well,
noticed.
see, define, right and wrong is a little, so for some people, that's spam or that's bad.
And there are, how many of you in here use the ad blocker app on your browser? And you know those convenience sites that come up and say, hey, you're using an ad blocker, please stop.
Yeah.
Not all of them catch this, because again, it's done at DNS level, so it replies back to you, not to them. There are, however, sites that will be an issue, and I'll show you how to kind of get around that in a minute. So, if you look, let's. So there is speedtest.net without using the ad block. So if I were to network. So it
Much more reasonable, thank you.
so that'll show you one of the advantages, just one of the sites. Yeah.
Is there a blocking list specifically for ill-behaved pop-ups?
You can add to the blacklist, and I'll show you how to do that.
There's a site with like hundreds, or tens of URLs, tens of URL lists.
Yeah, yeah. So you can add resources to it. Again, keep in mind that all the resources you add are held in memory. So if you're going to start doing things like, I don't know if you guys remember, it's now called Dan's Guardian. You could put those lists in there, you know, of the gambling sites. If you have kids, you can put in for those sites that you really don't want your kids to be accessing. So you can block anything. Pardon?
Like this deal.
Yes.
Oh yeah. So you can put as many as you want, just keeping in mind it's going to absorb RAM
So,
and affect performance.
so for giggles, when I was playing with that, I went to the sports site where it's got, and I would say there was 50 URLs of URLs, you know, I downloaded every one of them and sucked it into a regular Pi. It's 1.3 million URLs, it still functions.
Yeah.
It doesn't burn up that much, it doesn't burn up that much memory.
It doesn't, but also there's the parsing.
Yeah, I ain't feeling any pain at all.
So yeah, it eventually you'll get there,
Oh, yeah, I know.
but it might take a while. Yeah.
I was thinking more of lists of domain names that essentially don't have to be parsed and that I don't have to manually administer. I just give the URL for the list and
Right,
periodically refresh things.
but still the Pi's got to parse the list. Your Pi has to go through the process of making sure that, you know, any URLs you hit aren't on the list. And I'll show you in a second how you can add to it. So,
Is there a publicly available Pi that we can try?
it doesn't have to be on a Pi.
You run up in a Docker.
You can run it in Docker on a regular machine.
Right, I mean, if somebody posting this, so we can.
Oh, this right here that we're doing? There's a Raspberry Pi sitting right down there. That's what this is all going through.
Well, it's not going to be available when you tear it down.
Oh,
Try it from home.
well, like I'm saying, when you get home, you can install it and run it on any of your computers.
He's asking if there's a virtual Pi somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a virtual Pi, but you can, you know, you can run it on Ubuntu minimal, Ubuntu server minimal in a VM. And give your VM bridged networking, give it a static IP address, and as long as your VM's up and running, you're fine. Just people choose to do a Pi because it can run on a Pi. And I did, as a test, I ran it on the first, is a Pi 2, the first really publicly available Pi.
It'll run on 0.
Yeah, it will. That you may run into issues. No, that's what you got it at home.
Oh, no, I for giggles, I was just trying to do a mini stress test. We had some bets at work whether my 1.3 million. By the way, my network was useless when I loaded that. I couldn't go anywhere, but.
All right, so here are some of here are the query logs. It'll show you. Obviously, green is good. If you want to blacklist a specific, you can hit that and it'll add it. Long-term data, I haven't really looked at, so it shows you, I think these are the bits that you've seen in the regular dashboard. Here you have a whitelist. You can add a domain that you want to go. If you really like those ads from Microsoft, then you need to leave now, and you can add Microsoft to the whitelist when you get home. there are a couple of them that and I can't remember them off the top of my head. I think there are 2 or 3 that I've actually added. Again, you can do the same for blacklisting. You can use, and also go to, where's that trying to get? I don't care. I haven't looked. You can do regex, but I'm not going to do it. As I mentioned, there are those sites that come up and say, hey, you're using an ad blocker, and we're not going to show you our crap until you whitelist us or take us off. Well, I don't want to whitelist all their damn ads because I don't want ads. That's why I have this. So if you need to, you can disable the blacklisting for 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 5 minutes, or set a time, or permanently. There are a couple of sites that I do this for, sadly. I have a Roku. And if any of you have a Roku or any of you use CBS All Access, before you can watch a show, you've got to disable your ad blocker, or it won't show you the content. And so that's one of the sites, and I can't figure out, I've tried to whitelist it, but it's not their site that they care about. And I don't get it because my Roku doesn't show ads. You know, there are the ads within the show, but that doesn't come up. It also doesn't block the YouTube video ads that come up before you watch a YouTube, or in the middle of a YouTube video.
They're in streams.
They're in the stream, so yeah, those don't show up.
Well, I was playing around some other lists, like, one of them that turned off every site that happened to be on Amazon I couldn't get to, which, by the way, is a lot of the internet.
Well, yeah, that Amazon, Microsoft will eventually be at the top of that list, and Amazon is normally 2nd and 5th and 10th, because they have different bits and pieces to it. This is probably what you will use the most, is disabling for set periods of time. I generally find 10 seconds is not enough, because I can't get my fingers back to the trackpad or the little mouse nubbin on my, and get there in time. So I normally do 30 seconds. And that's enough for pretty much any of these sites. I've never had one complain after that. If you're using CBS All Access on a Roku, once you've cleared that hurdle, you can keep watching other shows without having to disable.
What do you think is going to happen when all content is going to be served by ads in the future?
Then I'll stop using the fucking internet. And I'll cry. Just remember, when you slit your wrist, this is just a call for help.
DNA.
What?
DNA. Down, not across.
There you go. All right, update Gravity. Gravity is what they call their list of block domains. So if you hit update, it'll go out. There you go. So it goes through, it shows you, it gives you the status and nothing to whitelist, number of regexes. And you'll see we've updated to 135,455, I think. I haven't touched the rest of these, although, no, I take it back. I have looked at the Pi-hole log.
Was that number based on all 7 lists?
Yeah, it's the number based on all lists. So there's the Pi-hole.log, which will scroll up. And it even tells you if it's a CNAME. And then the FTL log, which you don't need to see. And then there's a debug log. If you're having issues and you contact Pi-hole support, community support, whatever, they'll want the debug log. Then we go to settings. In the system, you can restart the DNS or restart the system or reboot your Pi. Keep in mind that while your Pi is booting, your DNS queries will all fail. You can also turn off your system if you really don't like accessing the internet, or at least all the systems attached to it. Flush the logs, kind of obvious. For block lists, you can turn them on or off, and here's where you add a URL. So if you find another blacklist that you want to add, you can add the URL and add those to it. And if you hit save and add it, you enter one, hit save, enter one, hit save, and then once you're done, hit save and update.
To be clear, that's lists of lists, not individual URLs.
Correct. Well, it's the URL for the list
Yeah.
that somebody else is maintaining. Again, here are you can add these. You can also add your own custom DNS services if you have your own. DHCP, I haven't used yet, but it's standard DHCP settings if you enable DHCP. Oh yeah, it does tell you the temperature in Celsius of your CPU. So if you don't care about that, because that's so relating to blocking ads, you can change the things. You can add an administrator email address, and I don't know how it emails you, but it does. I haven't done it. And then going to the privacy, again, that's what I talked about earlier with the 5 different levels of how much stuff gets logged. And finally, teleporter. So you can export the lists and do all kinds of fun stuff. Any questions? Anything you want to see from? Yeah.
2 questions.
Okay.
So if you're on the road with this, it's not going to work if it's pointing to your home, like in a hotel.
If you're in a hotel, what do you define it? If it is pointing to
Your
your
Raspberry Pi hole,
Mhm.
it should be in this server, but it's tied back someplace else. But you said at home, you point your router. I got confused about what's pointing to what.
Okay, your router-
You get lost in a hotel.
Okay, so 2 things there. If you take your Raspberry Pi running Pi-hole on the road, everybody that's left in the house is going to be kind of pissed because they're going to have no DNS. So that might not make, and if you're married, that could be dangerous to certain bits of your anatomy that I'm sure you're probably not wanting to lose.
They're never plugged in.
So you don't want to do that. You can set it up because I've got a little wireless router here that's connected to there, which is how we're doing all this. If I were to carry that and the Pi, keep that Pi as a spare, I could then use it in a hotel and not have a problem because everything's still set up on the router, on the wireless router.
Or you just use like OpenVPN or something like that.
Yeah, there's also VPN. Yeah, second question.
Second question, and this because I don't really understand networking. Can you install this on a virtual machine, like with a small Linux application, and run it inside the box?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you also have to keep in mind at that point you have 2 breakpoints. Your VM could die for whatever reason, or the machine it's running on could die for whatever reason. So if either of those
I'm not
two
talking about serving DNS to anybody but my machine.
specifically, oh, you mean run it as a VM on your local machine? Oh, yeah.
Laptop on the road.
Oh, yeah, you could do that too.
Ships has a Docker container, so you just run in Docker.
Yeah, run it as a Docker in Docker. I know Docker is a fun concept. But yeah,
I can conceptualize it, but I can't do it.
it's not as hard as you think. If I can learn it, fucking anyone can. Yeah.
One possible issue is if somebody has a web server and a mail server on the same domain name, and you're blocking that domain name, you're blocking both. There's no granularity there. You need to block one but not the other.
You can whitelist.
That's by domain name, it's not by port.
True. They shouldn't be doing it anyway. I wouldn't want mail from them if they're serving ads.
If I had a set for every site on the internet that is doing something they shouldn't be doing, I would be a rich man.
Well, yeah. All right. Any other questions? Yeah.
Can I run it directly on my machine, on my workstation, if I have a Mac or a Linux machine? I don't have to go through a VM, just native.
I would do it as a Docker image.
That's the latest plan.
Because if you do it as a Docker image, you also have to watch out for ports already being used because Docker uses its own internal DNS. So you'd have to, as Mr. Mitchell there is, yes.
Already did until you were given the demo, port down, ran it.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you do it in Docker, you'll have to disable Docker's DNS, which means it would be the only container in that Docker network. Correct.
Docker uses system DNS, so.
Pardon?
Docker uses system DNS, so you're fine.
That's its own internal.
You have to expose, which rolls up to your, for instance, if you're running.
Well, if, say you have a web server and a database server running, inside the container, your web server only has to know the name DB, which your external, outside of the Docker network, you can connect to it by the name DB. Is that correct, Frank?
Docker daemon runs a DNS, which then talks to the system DNS, so.
Right.
Indirectly, yes, directly, yes.
Any other questions?
I got one.
Yeah.
I added a domain to the blacklist and it's not being blocked.
I haven't added anything to the blacklist, so I can't.
DNS caches.
Well, I did, and I was looking against it, so it's still coming back with the ID. The guy blacklist, it's weird. Wait, didn't show up? Wow. Where is it there? Yeah, it's there.
Unix Age.
Got over.
Maybe your regex is wrong.
Well, I put in.
Don't blame IHO when you can't regex.
So actually it regex, so all I put at the top was unixstage.org and clicked add, and it did that for me. It was like,
Did you add exact? Did
Nope.
you add
I added
wildcard?
wildcard.
Which added to regex? I don't know regex, so I'm giving you crap for something I don't know about.
I just thought it was
Because
weird.
I'm that kind of a person. Alright. So, as soon as I'm done this, I'm gonna take down the wireless, all the fun stuff, so just so you're aware, you may wanna connect back to the main one. Alright, so So the best source for information on Pi-hole and all the stuff it does is piehole.net and docs.piehole.net. 90% of what I learned about Pi-hole comes from those two sites. So if there are no other questions, I'm done. And it'll be a couple minutes while we set up for rain.
Thank you.
Do you want power?
No, I think I got enough power. Is that? Yeah,
I do have the square.
oh, well, then I will take it.
Yeah, for a while.
That's why we all want.
I use
Yeah, you might have to restart. Because it's got to read it in the.
Oh, read it. Oh, yeah, you were.
Could be. If you want to start.
Would it be inappropriate if we look at pictures?
Does anyone mind their picture being taken? Not that I care, you're gonna have it done anyway. I'm just doing it.
Fair warning.
Explain
Yeah.
the technologies, diving into those, or particularly some of the emerging technologies we're dealing with.
All right. Hi, my name's Zach. Just kidding. My name's Andy Newton. Sorry. It's all right. This is my second meeting, actually, since not being here in like 20 years. So I'm going to do a presentation on the fish shell. And be forewarned, I'm not an expert on the fish shell. I've been using it for maybe about a year. But I also don't consider myself one of those shell power users. I never was under bash, and I don't really consider myself that even under fish. Unfortunately, I spent probably, I don't know, I have a misspent middle career where I was a Mac user. So
Hey, it's better than Windows.
let's not get carried away. That's why I have the escape key refugee on there. It's because the escape key on Macs is kind of an issue for people. All right, so I was a much more of a VI user than I was a Mac user, so that's what drove me away. Anyway, there's my actual kind of homepage, profile page on Mastodon. You can look it up. All right, so fish shell. So what does it mean? It's the friendly shell. That's what it means. And if you go to their website, they have this kind of cutesy little tagline, finally a command line shell for the 90s. It's kind of a joke. What they're getting at is that shells really haven't advanced a whole lot in a long time. I guess if you're a Windows user and you're into PowerShell, you might disagree with that. But I've never actually investigated that, so I don't know. Anyway, so what does fish shell have? What does it do? So there's kind of things it does right out of the box, and kind of some things that we really should have a long time ago. So basically out of the box it just has a lot of these features. Some of them are like VGA colors, so some shells just don't do that unless you do a lot of add-ons to them. Auto suggestions, and who's ever done bash scripting? Do you love it?
No.
All right. I mean, I've done, when beat with a whip, I'll do it. I'm not very fond of it myself because I just find the syntax quite confusing. And I'm not going to go into what the fish Fish's syntax is as far as programming goes, so that's a huge, huge topic. But when you look at it, it's actually readable, and you can look at it and go, oh, well, I can probably write this too. So it's not nearly as kind of weird as Bash is. So, by the way, you can stop me and ask questions anytime during the presentation. And again, so this comes back to, you know, when people talk about the fish shell and, hey, maybe you want to take a look at this, a lot of the counter arguments to why you shouldn't use fish shell is, well, you can do all this in ZSH or you can do all this in Bash. You just have to go get all these little add-ons and whatnot. And that's true. I've seen people with some very tricked out ZSH setups, and it looks pretty cool. The thing with Fish is it gives you a lot of this just with Fish itself. But on top of that, Fish does have its own community where people who have put add-ons and so forth out there for you to use, and I will show you some of that today. And actually, they're very usable, and I use them regularly. So, what I want to cover in the presentation today, I'm going to do a simple demonstration. Then I'm going to talk about versioning of the Fish shell, since they just came out with a new version. Cover installation, configuration of the config files, what are called package managers, and this is a thing where people do add-ons to shells. If you're a programmer, how many people are programmers? How many of you use virtual environments for doing, yeah, so when I mean virtual execution environments, I'm not talking about Docker or VM, I'm talking about like things like NVM or RVM, things to manage your language itself. And then some tips and tricks. So, as always, the authoritative source is fishshell.com. If you have any questions, you can always go there. That's the place to go for getting answers. So, this slide is just for me to know what to demo here as far as the presentation. So, let me flip over here. So, this is actually a test user I just put on this box just to show you what it looks like. This is actually Bash right here. But to start Fish, you just type Fish, and boom, you're in. That's easy, right? Of course, we all expected that. So, you know, you can say, say hello world, whatever. You'll notice that one of the things Fish did for me right there, I didn't do any, this is a test user account I just put on this laptop with no other configuration other than throwing Fish on here. That's all I did. And I already got that syntax highlighting and the auto suggestions going on right out of the box. So that's my whole point about it just gives you a lot of these things right out of the box. Now this over here is where I've added some things onto it. And this is a theme for Fish called Bob the Fish, and I'll explain how you do that kind of stuff later. But if you want to make it even more tricked out than what you get out of the box, there's all these add-ons and themes you can do with Fish. You can do these with other shells as well, so it's not a unique thing to Fish. But there's a community out there that keeps these things together. Yeah, so let me show you one of the other things with auto suggestions. As you saw when I did a command, when I do commands, it actually, you can see it saying, oh, the last time you did a git command was a git push. So I can just go all the way out with the arrow key, and you'll get the entire command again. So it does these auto suggestions from history. It'll actually try to make it contextual, so if you are not contextual, but it'll try to get a little bit smarter. So here's going, oh, well, here's your last git commit, so you can go ahead and do all that if you want to. And actually, the other thing it does is it is sometimes syntax aware. So if you can see, I'm adding this git commit message, and in red it's saying, well, you've got a string here. You better close it before you do anything else, otherwise it's not going to work. And then, the moment I do that...
Does the history it uses for the suggestions live over, like if you shut down the computer and come back up?
Yes.
Or is it, okay.
Yeah. So it's very much like what you would get with Bash. Yeah. So the question was, does the history... is it saved? Is it more persistent other than one session with Fish? The question, the answer is yes. Someone else have a question? Yes.
For autocomplete, can you get a menu of everything that matches the partial input?
Yes. So if you're talking about files, then yes. So if one of the things you can do, so if I wanted to list the name of files, I could actually press tab here, and so the moment I press tab, it said, oh, here's the 2 files in this directory you can play with if you want to. If you had 100 files, it would show them too. If you do double tab, it actually puts you into this little system here where you get to select between the 2.
But you can't do it just based on the syntax of the command you're typing in. You've got these string of characters, it's not a file name. You can't get a menu for auto-completing it.
It depends. So it's very much like the auto-completion system that Bash has. So if someone's written the things to do the auto-completion, yeah, you can't get that. There is, and it's very, I don't know exactly how that works, again, I'm not an expert. But there are a lot of people who seem to target fish because its auto-suggestion system is pretty good. There's another meetup in the area for Rust Group, and they've been working for the last couple of months on doing auto-completions for fish for Rust or something like that. So it's kind of an interesting thing. But it really depends upon the command and if someone's actually come along and actually added the auto-suggestions for it.
So
Tab completion, yeah.
out of the box, if you just type CD and started completing, would it just pull out the directories and not the files?
So it actually, so that dot is going, that's the last time you executed that. But yeah, it's not giving me anything there.
Their files, because there aren't any directories in there.
Well,
Is there any directories in there?
right, so if I say CD, there.
Yeah, so it's being intelligent.
Yeah. Yeah, it tries to, as far as possible, give you a good set of suggestions. So, any other questions? Yes?
Is there a way to search back to the previous command from one?
Yes, so there's a history. You can just like Bash, you can just go up. So see where I've been doing things.
Specifically with the autocomplete, can you hit like
Control R is what he's talking about.
like reverse I search where you can hit Control R and keep going back?
I don't think so. That I've never done, so it might be possible. Again, not an expert. Yeah. All right. So that's just a basic demonstration. One of the things about Fish is they just came out with a new version less than 6 months ago. In December, version 3 came out. Current version, as I checked last night, is 3.02. A lot of distributions still has the 2.7 or even the 2.6 version. 2.7.1 was the last version in the 2 series. There are some breaking changes between 3 and 2, and it's a long list of breaking changes. However, they're kind of esoteric. I went through there and started reading them, and I couldn't find a point where I would actually run into these things. My sense is that if you're new to Fish, you yourself will probably not run into it. If the only time you would is when you're getting someone else's scripts and you're trying to execute them, and they rely on something that's in an earlier syntax that went away in a newer version of Fish. However, everything I've seen that was a much earlier version of Fish, like Fish 2.2, everything seems to be compatible all the way up. That's my experience so far. But there are release notes. You can go read them if you care to know that information.
Do they have a policy on deprecation? Do they let it go for?
You know, that's a good question. I don't know. I know they have all the release notes for all the previous versions out there, and they have their own repository, so you can go get the versions of Fish if you really need it. But yeah, I don't know what their deprecation policy is. Whether they're like maintaining version 2 with bug fixes or something like that.
Oh, sometimes like they'll throw an error. Hey, by the way, this is being deprecated, and that way the next release is gone, so you have a little warning. But
yeah,
shells are a little different languages. So
yeah, they are.
I don't know if that's a really useful feature or not. I have to admit, I haven't seen a shell that deprecates a feature.
Yeah, I've not seen that. So installing is fairly simple if you're going to use your system's package manager. It would be the recommended way of doing it. A lot of the repositories have fish in there now. They didn't about a year ago, but a good many of them do now. So the recommended way is just to use your system's package manager to install fish. The only caveat is for things like CentOS or RHEL, they probably won't have fish at all. So you have to go add there are fish repositories that the fish community maintains. So you have to go add those repositories to your system's package manager to pull down the software.
Could it be in the EPEL?
Yeah, so I don't, it could be, I don't know. I do know that if you go to the fish website, they maintain a long list of, you have this OS, use this repository. The other issue is that, so if you're on like Arch or Manjaro, one of those ones that kind of does more of a rolling update, you're going to be on 3.02. One of the things I've noticed about Ubuntu, 18.04, when it first came out, didn't even have it in the repositories. I think 18.04.2 does, but they have the old 2.7 version. So if you want the latest version and you're not on one of those distributions that try to keep that is fairly up to date, then you're probably going to want to go add the fish repositories to your system's package manager to pull it down, and then you'll stay current once you do that.
You got a question?
Yeah, sorry.
Can two versions of fish coexist so that if the feature is removed, you can add a shebang to the scripts that require the old one?
It depends on how you would install it. It's just an executable, so you could have two executables on the system, but it would just be a matter of how you install it. So if you're using a systems package manager, it's going to probably put fish on there in whatever latest version that its repository would have. If you have some sort of down version of fish, then you would have to figure out how to maintain it yourself, right? And make sure that executable isn't overwritten by something else. But I have not seen them having like a fish 2 executable version of fish 3. If you wanted to do that, you would probably have to compile it yourself. There are some dependencies you'll have to go resolve them depending on your distribution, but once you've done that, the actual build process is fairly straightforward. I haven't done this, but that's what I'm told. So, any questions about that? And again, just to try it, just type fish. Once you've installed it, just type fish, and you're up and running. The other thing is, so once you've tried it, if you want to switch over to it, as your default shell, you do the change shell command. I'm kind of perplexed as why change shell has to have -s to actually change the shell. But I guess that's how it works. But anyway, that's all you really have to do, and it's that simple. For configuration, and I'm going to demo this. One of the things, so out of the box, fish comes with this thing called fish config, and so if you run fish config, let me show this to you. Fish config. What it does, it starts a web server and then opens your web browser to a little application that allows you to configure it, and then you can start modifying themes and so forth right out of the box if you want to. You can even play with the prompt if you want to change that. And this is without any of the add-ons doing themings and so forth. You can look at your variables, you can look at your history, which I'm not going to show up here, and so forth. So, I think there's bindings. So, yeah. So you can actually go through and look at all the different things you can do with the bindings if you're a keyboard warrior. So, all right. So let's switch back. So yeah, so that was actually when I first started running fish. I was just like, well, this is not that fancy. And then I ran the fish config command, and that came up. I was like, well, this is really easy to figure out. All you have to do is do a lot of clicking in a web browser, and you've got something pretty customized fairly fast. And that's one way of doing it. One of the other questions that's probably going to come up is, in Bash you have bash RC file, and what's the equivalent to that? In Fish, it's the config.fish file, and that's under the .config/fish directory. So that's where that is, and it's basically the same thing as the bash RC file. It gets executed every time Fish starts up. Fish also has these other things called auto-loading functions, and these are basically small Fish scripts in very discrete things called functions that you can put into a directory called fish/functions, and what they do is once you put them in there, they're Fish kind of recognizes those as commands. And here, this is an example stolen from the Fish website. But LL, which is long list, people do that all the time. In Fish, that's just a function that just executes LS with the correct arguments, and that's how that works. And you can just throw it in your /functions directory, and you're good. In fact, I did this one for SDK because I wanted to get SDK man to work with Fish, and all I did was write this function real fast, do it in my directory, and it was good to go. So Fish package managers. I talked about this earlier. So Fish package managers are those things that add utilities or sometimes Fish scripts that people have out on the internet, or themes. This is not unique to Fish, like ZSH has this as well. But these package managers will actually manage a lot of the customization for Fish on your behalf, all these third-party customizations. And Fish actually has 3 of them. There's Oh My Fish, which I think is the most popular. That is, many people have ZSH or use ZSH, but there's an Oh My ZSH thing out there too, which is where this idea comes from. But Oh My Fish basically has a lot of has a repository of plugins, third-party plugins that have been written that you can install, and they actually will add functions to Fish. There's also themes, and there's a theming guide for people who create themes for Fish out there. And that's where I got the Bob the Fish from. I just did a OMF space install Bob the Fish. And there's a whole website on their GitHub page related to it. To install it's pretty easy. You just download the file and pipe it into Fish. Now, John said earlier you're not supposed to be doing that, but what he said was you're not supposed to do that into Bash.
Yeah.
Fish is totally fine.
Yeah.
It's a joke. Everyone on the live stream, that's a joke. Fisher is another one. The guy who wrote Fisher, it's another package manager. It happens to be package compatible with Oh My Fish, so it'll actually install things from Oh My Fish as well. And I've actually installed it not on this system, but I have another system where I've got it installed along with Oh My Fish, and they don't seem to collide or anything like that. The guy who wrote it is actually, he's written a lot of extensions and add-ons for Fish to do various in-a-century things, so he's quite active in the community. And then there's the third one's called the Bundle, which is a minimalist package manager or plugin manager, kind of based off of Bundle, which is the one for Vim that people use. So it's also compatible with Oh My Fish. All right. So virtual languages or virtual execution environments. For those who don't know what these are, so these are basically when you're writing code for some languages, sometimes the actual compiler or interpreter or even the runtime environment, for your benefit, you want to find a way of having multiple versions on your system. So you see this with people, with actually a ton of the languages that you do this with. And what happens is these things are not containers and they're not VMs. What they are they're just scripts that modify the execution path of your environment. So popular ones for Node is NVM, RVM, so forth. How many people do programming? Ever use these things? Yeah. So how many people are like Python programmers? They seem to be very popular. Yeah. So you've probably used virtualenv before if you wanted multiple versions of Python on your system. So that's what these things are. The issue with these is most of them are written for bash. So because the fish syntax and the bash syntax are not compatible, when you try to run them, they'll either error out or just bad things will happen. Well, not bad things, but things just won't work. So that's one of the problems with these virtual environments. However, there are many workarounds. The fish community has quite a few different plugins and different wrappers around these virtual environments, so you can get up and running pretty fast. This is only a partial list of what's up there. There's also 2 generic wrappers, which you can use. One's called Bass, and the other one's called Fishbacks. And these things are kind of virtual wrappers. So if you run into some sort of language environment that doesn't have a plugin, you can go get one of these generic wrappers and use them for that. And they're pretty easy to use. They do take a little more configuration. Basically, you're going to write one of your own fish function for whatever language you're dealing with, but it's usually pretty simple. The SDK one I showed you was the one I wrote for SDK Man.
Another question.
Yeah. Oh, let me see. Yes.
In OpenSUSE, there's a package, 2 packages. I think they're called Update Alternatives and ES2 Alternative that allow installing things that are normally mutually exclusive, and you can control which one is active. Are any of the fish distributions packaged to take advantage of that?
I do not know if they're in the alternatives repositories or alternative systems. That never actually occurred to me to go look.
You have to have something in the RPM that controls the handling of it in order for that to work.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess Fedora and CentOS and even Ubuntu and Debian have the alternative systems. So you can do it with like Vim and all sorts of other things, but I've never seen fish in there. But to be honest, I never went and looked either. You're right, because they do have that for which shell you want to use. Though someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I would think that you wouldn't really need to do that with shells, because then you install multiple shells and just use the change shell command for changing your default.
Well, as an example, Regina and OpenObjectRex in SUSE are mutually exclusive, but they added the necessary support in the RPM so that you could use the alternatives facility to have both installed at the same time and then switch between them or use the shebang to get the one you wanted.
Yeah, I don't know if fish is in there or not. I haven't looked. So, any other questions? All right. So one of the cool things when I was actually putting fish on this system, I was going through and trying to figure out how to add something to my path, and I discovered this buried on the fish website. Have you ever had this issue where you're installing something and then you have to add something to your execution path, and you're like, oh, now I have to go find the place in my bash RC where I want to add this, and and then if I really want it to be effective, for any future shells, I have to restart things or whatnot. In fish, they have these things called universal variables, and they have one specifically for dealing with the need for adding things to your path. And what you can do is you can use this universal variable to add something to your path, and it'll set that, and it sets it for your shell, the shell you're in right there, any other shells, fish shells that happen to be open, and anything you're going to open in the future. So I thought it's a pretty cool little tip for moving things along when you need to do that. The other thing is this is really a fishism. This is just kind of something that you'll see a lot. You see this with the ZSH people too, and with people who add Vim plugins. There's this thing called Powerline fonts, and when I flip over here and show you the Bob the Fish thing, the thing actually making the little railroad graph icon, that's from the Powerline fonts. The actual angles in the prompt, that's from the Powerline fonts. If you didn't have it installed, it wouldn't look like this. It would actually look a lot worse. So those are the fonts, that's a font set you probably want to install. And a lot of the theming, and it's not just for fish, but a lot of theming for a lot of console type applications use that. And so that's probably something you want to install. And in my experience, you can just do that with your system package manager in general. So you can go to their GitHub page and they will explain to you how you install it manually if you need to. I know I showed this earlier. One of the other interesting things I find cool about Fish is there's a functions command. A lot of what you can do in Fish is implemented in a Fish function. And if you want to see what that function is, you can just say functions space and whatever the command is. And if it's a function, it'll actually list the function for you. And generally, a lot of the functions have a small description at the top of them, which describe what they are. So if I went over here and I said functions, see, and you can see it was telling me I misspelled that. Functions, L, and boom. It's telling me, where it found it and what the actual code is. Further reading, we'd spend a long time talking about this. If you want to know about programming the Fish shell, there's a fairly good website or blog post by Nicholas Van Horen, and here's the URL for that. And he just goes into the kind of the syntax. He breaks it down in more of a kind of I want to learn the syntax type content versus what was on the Fish shell website, where they approach it more in a what I consider a haphazard tutorial format. So that's there. Jorge Ducaron, I hope I'm not messing up his name. That's the guy who wrote Fisher. He also has the Fish cookbook out there on GitHub. So if you're ever like, oh, how do I do something in Fish, you can go look up that. He also has the Fish Awesome GitHub page as well, where he lists all the different types of things, different packages that you can have for Fish. And of course, there's always the Fish shell itself. So, and that's it. Any questions? Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Wait, we do have one.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna, so I've tried setting it as my default shell before, and it's had some problems interacting with some of, like, I guess, the launch scripts on LXD.
Okay, I mean, were they just modified? So so one of the things you can do, like if you have a bash script, you say bash whatever, and then launch the script that way. That's how you would do that if you have a bash script. If it's a bash script, it's obviously not going to execute native Fish, but there's no problem just executing bash itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm not sure where the problem is, though. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know I've never had a problem launching much. And generally, if I know it's a bash script, so sometimes things are bash scripts and they don't have the .sh on there to tell you. So that might be one of the problems. But in general, I've not had too many problems executing things like that. So, any other questions? All right. I will send the link to the presentation. The presentation's in Markdown format in GitHub, and I'll send the link out because I know I had a lot of URLs in here, so you guys can have that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. this fast enough before Brandon gets back. For those of you who don't know, Brandon's a Docker captain. So, Docker captain is what Docker gives to somebody who's not a Docker employee that's very, very much promotes Docker. And damn, it came back. All right. Thank you again to Andy or Zach, whichever way he wants to go. For the topic. I'm going to talk about the Traefik Edge router. I'm going to do it kind of the same way I did Pi-hole, death by PowerPoint, followed by actually doing shit. So, talk about what is Traefik, getting ready to use Traefik. Traefik does come as a standalone app. I'm not going to cover that because I was lucky to get the stuff I did get, plus it's kind of out of the scope of what this talk was about. We'll talk about the fact it runs on Docker. We'll go through the Docker Compose YAML file, then the Traefik.toml. It's a format I've never heard before. And then I'll show you the Traefik dashboard. Like the Pi-hole dashboard, the Traefik dashboard is not secure, so it's not something you want the whole world to see. Pardon?
It's read-only.
Is it?
I don't think there's anything you can do from it, you can just look at it.
Okay, well, unless you want people, if you want people to learn or not, it's up to you. Yeah, information's power. Traefik is a reverse proxy and a load balancer. It does auto discovery, so any, I'm going to relate this entirely to Docker. So any other applications within the same Docker network, it will automatically find, and Brandon, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on anything, because I'm relatively new to Docker. It also provides metrics, and where I failed is it automatically will set up HTTPS with Let's Encrypt. Every time you add a new application, or in the case of what we're doing today, a new website, which is just easier for me to do than an application. Traefik is maintained by a company called Containious, and they are a French-based company. The Traefik website is traefik.io, and I've got that in the resources at the end. Getting ready for it. It's easy. Install Docker. And if you choose not to use Swarm, Docker Compose, which is what I did for mine, because I just had the one. Mine is running on EC2, so I didn't want to pay for free. And so I've got it in Docker Compose. And that's pretty much it. You're ready to get Traefik up and running. Traefik will work with pretty much any iteration of Docker. Docker Compose, Docker Swarm, Kubernetes are the easiest to use. Using Docker alone, I don't know if it would work, because you need something else, and the standalone Docker container, you'd have to configure to get them to talk.
Pretty much everything in Compose you can do with regular standalone Docker. It's giving you a lot of niceties, making things like easier for Tom.
Yeah, so if you're going to do it in Docker, you may as well do it in Compose, so that everything's bundled together. So the Docker Compose.yaml file will have the services for Traefik and any applications that are routed through Traefik. For today, it'll be very, very simple web pages that will just tell you the name of the web page, because all it needs is to show you. And finally, the Traefik.toml file will define the entry points, which is what Traefik calls the endpoints. As I said, I didn't have time to get HTTPS and Let's Encrypt working for this demo. I will try to get it set up so that next month, if Peter will give me 5 or so minutes of his time. No? Okay. Then y'all have to look yourselves. But I'll try to update next meeting. I should be able to figure it out by then. The dashboard listens, as I said, on port 8080, and it doesn't have an encrypted solution, but as Brendan said, it's read-only, so nobody can mess anything up. So I'll show you the
While you're pulling that one up, I have seen people that take the dashboard in Traefik and tell Traefik to make a pass that to itself, and then when you set TLS up for Traefik, you now have TLS for the dashboard.
Okay. I'll look for that. All right. So, as I mentioned, there's we're going to start with the Traefik.toml file. And for what I did, it's pretty easy. It's just these 3, and you can't really see all the way to the side, so let me. Is the font big enough for everyone to read? Full day? And as those of you who have listened to me talk too many times before, my domain is ennoil.com at the bottom. But right now the default entry points are HTTP. Once you've added SSL and Let's Encrypt, you'd have HTTP, HTTPS. Then you define your entry points. So for HTTP, it goes to the address and port 8080. For the entry point Traefik, that's the dashboard, which is whatever address :8080. The entry point uses the API section. So the API is set up for the Traefik entry point, dashboard being true, debug is true only to help you find issues. The Docker endpoint, var run docker.sock, that is how Traefik knows to automatically update for new service or for new services. Then your domain name and exposed by default. I forget what that means, but they told me to put false, so I did.
You don't, every single container that comes up, the container ID becomes a path into it.
Ah, thank you. Then the Docker compose file. Again, you set up the services, so Traefik. I used the Alpine image of Traefik. Yes, I read the security thing about Alpine, and this is just a demo, so I don't care right now. This will all be torn down within an hour of us going home. The ports. How many of you have experience with Docker? Really? Okay. How many of you would like me to explain in detail the bits and pieces up there? well, not heavy detail. I mean, we only have 20 more minutes. You want a little bit of, okay.
Just a little.
Okay, so it lists the services. The first service listed is traffic. That's our router in itself. The image, that's the Docker image that that service uses. So in this case, traffic::Alpine. It's using the Alpine Linux version of the traffic container. The ports, the first one, port 80 externally to Docker, is open and routes to port 80 on the traffic container. Traffic 8080 external to Docker goes to 8080 internally to Docker. And where that would matter is if you didn't have Docker and you had all these web servers, they can't all listen on port 80 because it's already, you know, once the first one, they're all being used. So if you didn't have traffic, test 1 would have to go from 80 to 80. Test 2 would go 81 to 80, etc. to keep them separate. That's what makes traffic so cool. The volumes are for persistent data. So on my laptop, there's a directory, Docker web traffic. Anything in that directory shows up in the container in /etc/traffic. So that's where the TOML file goes for traffic to read it. And then the var run Docker sock, as I mentioned, that's how traffic knows what's going on in Docker. So that makes sense?
Yeah.
And the labels are in the test 1. That's so that traffic knows to interact with. And the reason why I've commented out test 2 and test 3 is to show you that once I uncomment it and I add test 2 to my Docker environment, traffic will automatically pick it up and serve that web page.
So, important pro tip on this one that I've run into in the past. When you go to swarm mode, the label section moves in within a deploy section because the label has to go on the service, not on the individual container.
Okay. All right. So that, did you all catch that? If you're running this on Swarm, the labels from test 1, test 2, and test 3, they would go into the deploy directive, I guess, is that what they're referred to?
Another nested level down.
Yeah, they'd be nested into deploy. So you'd have deploy, labels, etc. As opposed to this, which is because I'm using Docker Compose. Thank you. So that's pretty much all you need to do to get this set up. So what I'll do is I'll show. So here is test 1. And yes, as I said, it's a very basic website because it doesn't need to show much. So test 1 is running. Test 2 is not. So it's giving me a 404 error. And test 3 will give the same. And then I forgot. Okay, so here's the dashboard. And the dashboard shows only the single backend. The IP address is the internal Docker IP address for that test 1 service. And then the front end shows you that it's going to the backend. So right now, test 1 is the only image that's up and the only page being served. So if I go back to So, and then you see test 2 and test 3. So if I edit, I forget, what's the, Dr. Compose will allow you to just start the one.
You can just say Docker Compose up -D, and it'll figure out what's different.
Okay. All right, so we come back and you'll notice it's already picked up that there's a new web server and it's on .04. And if I go up to my web browser and reload, this is test 2. And again, test 3 is still not up and running, so we can add it. Traefik again shows the new backend and test 3 is up. So that is literally pretty much all you need to do. Any questions?
Yeah. So how does it know the health of the back end? Is there a...
Is that done through?
It can do a polling, it can have a health check that you give it, but for the most part, especially in a swarm mode, you design your image with a health check in the image, and it pulls itself, and then Traefik just looks at the Docker status of the table itself.
Okay. So you can't do that just with normal Compose. You have to use Swarm or Kubernetes for that type of...
Even with normal Compose, it will tell you the health, but it doesn't react to the health. I'm not sure if Traefik will do that or not.
Well, check, just basic time.
Yeah, that's straight Docker.
That's your thing.
But straight Docker doesn't do anything with it.
That shows.
It'll report it, but it doesn't do
Yeah,
anything.
that shows.
Any other questions?
Yes, you're
I forgot, last but not least. On this one, I got my start from this Medium post. The Medium post is not 100% accurate, it's a little old. Traefik.io and docs.traefik.io are your best resources to use as usual. And the docs aren't fully complete, they're still working. There are a couple of sections that they'll tell you they're not done with, but it will get you started. No, it's all in English. So yeah, any other questions? Okay. As I said, those of you who are looking for jobs and those who are looking for people, if you guys want to come, I guess, up front here, since going out back there nobody ever does. Do you want to come up here? Yeah.
Yeah, 2 items. Those who missed the Red Hat Summit, there was a kumbaya moment for Microsoft and Red Hat. Not only are there partnerships now, but they're actually actively working together and admitting it.
Yeah, and Microsoft's putting the Linux kernel into Windows. I still don't trust them. They're going to add something to it, then they're going to sue somebody for stealing IP.
One question I have for the general populace. Are there any Linode users out here? Okay, I have a couple questions for you guys if I could.
Okay. All right, so thank you all for coming out, and we will see you whatever the second Saturday of next month is. It changes every month. And don't forget to, and that'll be June 8th is our next meeting. And don't forget to do your